Hi, it's Shan Wu with a under color of law take on an important new lawsuit that is part of Signalgate. So a group called the American Oversight has filed this lawsuit, and it is seeking to compel people to do their jobs. And it was first reported by the HuffPost, and they're requesting that a federal judge formally declare that Hegseth and other officials in the chat violated their duty to uphold laws around the preservation of official communications. Remember how we were discussing that the Federal Records Act is implicated and that this was a way of not shining any light on it, keeping the communications under the radar, so to speak. That's what this lawsuit is calling them out for. And they're trying to get the court to do something about that because, as we know, there's a question as to whether or not DOJ would ever look into this from a criminal standpoint for the Espionage Act concerns, meaning they were talking on an insecure channel, revealing national defense related information. So this lawsuit points out that the National Archivist has a duty to help preserve the federal records. And also, as a side note, because Vance was on it, it would be the Presidential Records Act also, because the stuff he talks about, his communications, fall under the Presidential Records Act. And so the lawsuit's asking the judge to agree with them and to point out that the National Archivist should have to step in to ask the Attorney General in case something is not happening with preservation of records. Now, if that sounds familiar, it should. Because that is how the whole Trump classified documents at Mar-a-Lago got started, because the archivist was saying, hey, what's going on here? We're not getting these things back. And they did indeed ask the Attorney General to do something about it. And that's what started the whole classified documents case, which is now gone. So this particular lawsuit, asking the judge to declare that's the right thing to do, but unfortunately, guess who is currently the acting archivist? Yep, that's right. Marco Rubio, the thirsty man. That's my favorite clip of Rubio.
In the short time that I've been here in Washington, nothing has frustrated me more than false choices like the one the president laid out tonight.
So we know Rubio, who is now serving in, I think, 3 capacities. He's Secretary of State. He's National Archivist. I'm blanking on the third title. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, you would think Secretary of State would keep him busy enough, right? He's not going to be asking the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to step in and do anything. And even if he did ask her, she wouldn't do anything, right? And in the meantime, in terms of keeping up with his duties, are we really expecting that Rubio, who participated in this breach of security, in this chat on an app that was set to automatically delete, not by default? We're seeing reporting now that I didn't even realize it's about Signal. You have to set it. It doesn't have to delete every 4 days or every week. Somebody manually set it to delete. We're asking Rubio, who participated in that, to also be in charge of protecting the records. Does not make any sense at all, right? So, by the way, HuffPost did a really great job of laying out not only the lawsuit, but the Signalgate story. We'll put the link up. It's definitely worth a read if you want a good summary, and no paywall. Now, one point about the complaint is that it's so important that they're asking for it to force compliance, right? It's brought under the Federal Records Act and the Administrative Procedures Act, and it's asking the court to declare that the Signal chat is subject to the Federal Records Act, because you can certainly imagine, and I'll remind you about the hearing in a second, that they'll be saying, it's not subject to the FRI, is a Signal chat. It's not subject to the Federal Records Act. It's not really an official records. Now, that's going to be a little bit undercut, right? Because remember, John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, was trying to claim that Signal's okay to use as long as the formal communications are preserved. So he's got it rattling around in his brain someplace. There's a problem with this if we didn't preserve some version of it. So it's really important that the suit asks for the judge to specifically make the finding that the communications are under the Federal Records Act. And then they also go on to specifically ask that the court order Rubio and others to basically do their job here. And again, because we're not going to have the help of the DOJ enforcing this, and more important, it's not even that they're enforcing it. It's that all these actors know nothing's going to happen. So why would they even bother to take any precautions or preserve anything? That's the atmosphere that they're working in. So having some civil accountability here, asking for injunctive relief, that's really important because it's giving them some accountability and, of course, shining some light on it. The court has granted our old friend, the TRO, temporary restraining order, and we know that that's really critical to prevent any further destruction of the records. And by the way, this is the same Judge Boasberg, that's handling the deportation cases. And of course, as you might expect, Trump's greatly criticizing the fact that the judge got the case, saying that's really disgraceful, which is quite laughable. I mean, it's a random assignment. so there's nothing to that. Now, so much of the Signalgate discussion controversy has been around the security breach, which was really terrible. But the fact that they were caught doing government business off the radar, under the radar, is critical for the regime's plan to avoid not only accountability. I mean, arguably, they avoid the criminal accountability by packing the Supreme Court, installing Pam Bondi, and putting in Trump's personal defense lawyers at DOJ to run it. But they also need a lack of transparency. They don't want anyone to be able to see what they're really doing because then people will talk about it. It's the old, see something, say something idea. They want to work in silence and darkness. That's why these kinds of lawsuits are so critical to shine sunlight on them. Sometimes we tend to be a bit dismissive, particularly those of us who worked in government, on things about getting transparency out, like the Freedom of Information Act lawsuits. But they serve a really critical function in our society. And this is not a FOIA suit, but it shows how you can use the courts to force things to happen, to at least force there to be attention being paid to it. Now, the amount of attention that this is gathering, the Signalgate scandal, it's not going away. I mean, the Trump administration wants to pretend, oh, this will just pass. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about some alleged immigrant crime. Let's talk about Elsie Stefanik not going to be the UN ambassador, anything to distract, right? But there's some signs that distraction is not working. So, for example, there is now a bipartisan call for the Department of Defense Inspector General to do an investigation. There's been a request for a classified briefing to verify the contents of the Signal chat. I mean, presumably now you need a classified briefing to make sure the things were not classified. Hard to figure out what they're thinking there, but it's important. They're asking for the briefing, put it under the classified rubric so that people don't have an excuse for saying, we can't talk about this, it's classified. And also, this is a big one, polling indicates people think it's a big deal. In fact, they think it's a bigger deal than either the Hillary Clinton emails, which Trump still lives in that world, or Biden's cognitive abilities, which also Trump continues to bring that up all the time. So that says something because you never know exactly how a public outcry may affect Congress, how congressional pressure will work, because that's how democracy is supposed to work. These sort of different pieces, the voice of the people, their representatives, should all have a part in this. Now, I just did an opinion piece in the Daily Beast about Signalgate. And one of the things that I talked about there was I reviewed some other historical scandals that ended up with accountability due to public outcry and congressional pressure, like the Iran-Contra, secret weapons deal, and of course, Watergate as well. And in that opinion piece, I ended with this recollection. There's a paywall there, so I'll share this part with you. I'll read it out loud for you. So indeed, Trump may find that if these trends continue to show that people view Signalgate as a serious problem, may change his mind, right? Should this snowball further, then a question posed by Nixon during Watergate may prove instructive. Captured on the secret taping system he had set up in the White House, Nixon, who was beginning to realize the full danger of the scandal, is heard asking on tape, quote, well, who was the asshole that did this thing, unquote. And in a case this expansive and well-documented, this is me writing in Daily Beast, there's certainly more than one. So I'm going to actually close with a snippet from that tape for you. You got to listen hard because Nixon's taping system wasn't that good, but we can listen to the president's own words there. And before actually we play that, I just want to say a special shout out to a colleague of mine who I have enormous respect for, and that's John Dean, who was President Nixon's White House counsel. And he was the whistleblower. He stood up for the country. And because of him, really, we had sunlight shone on the Nixon administration and its corruption. So you can take a listen to this snippet, and we'll also put up a link to one of John's great books about the Watergate era and the proceedings. And if you want to take a look at that, it's really a great summary for that. So take a listen to, I think he was the 37th president of the United States, what he had to say. And we will talk to you later. Keep replies and comments coming. Really enjoy hearing them and engaging with you. Thanks.
Well, who is the asshole that did that? Is it Liddy? Is that the fellow? He must be a little nuts. Yeah.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.